Most preppers will freeze to death inside a house full of supplies, not because their gear failed, not because they ran out of food, not because they made a mistake in the chaos of an emergency. They will freeze because on a calm afternoon, years before anything went wrong, nobody told them the one thermal principle that actually determines survival in a sustained cold weather grid collapse. They bought the sleeping bags, they stocked the food, they filled the fuel cans, and they skipped the step that makes all of it work, because the industry selling them gear had no financial reason to teach it. This video is that step. If you've spent any time in the prepper community, you already know the checklist. 72-hour kit, water storage, fire starting redundancy, emergency blankets, wool layers, a quality sleeping bag rated to -20. You've read the forums, watched the videos, maybe spent real money building a supply cache that you're quietly proud of, and almost none of that preparation addresses the actual physics of why people die in cold weather emergencies. They die because heat leaves, and they never learned how to make it stay. The survival gear industry in the United States generates over $11 billion annually. That market is built on a simple and effective formula. Identify a fear, manufacture a product that addresses the surface of that fear, and sell it with enough authority that the buyer feels equipped. What that market does not sell, what it has no incentive to sell, is the foundational knowledge. That makes the difference between a person who survives 6 days without heat and a person who doesn't. Because that knowledge doesn't come in a package. It doesn't have a brand name. It can't be drop shipped, and it costs nothing. The gear is not useless. Let's be clear about that. Quality insulation, fire starting tools, emergency thermal blankets. These are real assets in a real emergency. But they are tools. And a tool used without understanding the physics it's meant to work with is just an expensive way to feel prepared. The sleeping bag rated to -20 will not save you if you're sleeping in a house hemorrhaging heat through 8 rooms, 2 uninsulated staircases, and a drafty chimney flue left open. The emergency blanket will not save you if you've never practiced the techniques that make it functional rather than decorative. What saves you is understanding heat, where it goes, how fast it leaves, and what actually stops it. In the winter of 1941, the German military completed its encirclement of Leningrad. Over 872 days, the city was cut off. No fuel deliveries, no external heat source, temperatures that dropped to -30 degrees Fahrenheit during the worst weeks of January and February. Roughly 800,000 civilians died during the siege, the majority from starvation. But among the survivors, people who endured those temperatures and damaged buildings with no functional heating infrastructure, documented accounts collected by Soviet historians in the post-war decades reveal a consistent pattern of behavior that modern thermal science now fully explains. They got small, they abandoned the large rooms and gathered into single spaces. They hung blankets and coats over doorways. They sealed window gaps with rags and newspaper. They clustered together, and they stopped moving unnecessarily. They were not applying a survival protocol they'd been taught. They were discovering, through desperation, the physics that the modern prepper community was never handed because there was nothing to sell alongside it. Those people survived -30 degrees in broken buildings because they instinctively did what the science demands. They stopped the heat from leaving. Here's the physics, and this is the part that changes how you think about every piece of gear you own. Heat does not disappear. It migrates. Specifically, it moves from warmer environments to colder ones through 3 completely distinct mechanisms, and if you only address one of them, the other 2 will drain your warmth just as efficiently as if you'd done nothing at all. The first mechanism is conduction, direct heat transfer through physical contact. When your body touches a cold surface, heat flows from you into it. This is why sleeping on a cold floor in a premium sleeping bag will still drain your core temperature. The bag is addressing radiation and convection. The floor is conducting your heat directly out from underneath you. The ground beneath a house in winter can sit at 32 degrees or lower. Every surface you contact without a proper insulating barrier is a direct pipeline out of your body. The second mechanism is convection. Heat loss through air movement. Cold air is denser than warm air. It flows in through gaps, drops to floor level, and systematically displaces the warm air your body worked to create. A room with a single unsealed gap around a window frame can lose its accumulated warmth within 40 minutes in sustained sub-freezing temperatures. Most preppers seal their obvious drafts and consider the problem handled. Convective loss doesn't come only through obvious gaps. It comes through electrical outlets, fireplace flues, attic access panels, mail slots, the gap beneath every interior door. In a standard American home, the cumulative convective loss area, the total unsealed space through which air freely moves, can exceed several square feet when measured carefully. The third mechanism is radiation, infrared heat emission directly from warm surfaces into cooler surrounding air and objects. Your body radiates heat constantly. So do the walls you've warmed, the floor, the ceiling. That heat radiates outward toward every cooler surface in the room. Emergency thermal blankets address this. Reflective materials bounce radiant heat back toward the source. But a blanket wrapped around your body in a large, cold room is fighting a radiant battlefield on all sides simultaneously. The room itself is radiating heat outward through the walls into the exterior cold. You are one small warm object in a large radiating volume, and the math is not in your favor. This is why the missing step is not a product. It is a practice. It is called thermal zoning, and it is the single most effective cold weather survival technique that the prepper content machine consistently, almost universally, fails to teach. Thermal zoning means collapsing your survivable living space to the smallest room you can practically occupy. Interior rooms are better than exterior rooms. They have fewer wall surfaces exposed to outdoor temperature. Smaller rooms are better than larger ones. Less air volume means less heat required to raise the ambient temperature and less volume to defend against convective loss. Low ceilings are better than high ones. Heat rises, and a room with a 9-foot ceiling has a substantial volume of air above your head that you are heating for no physiological benefit. You identify your thermal zone before the emergency, not during it, not at 2 in the morning when the power has been out for 18 hours and the indoor temperature has already dropped to 45 degrees. Now, today. Once you've identified the room, you prepare it. Heavy blankets or moving pads hung over the doorway create a convective barrier. Air cannot easily move through dense fabric, which means the warm air you generate stays in the space rather than migrating into the cold hallway. Towels or draft stoppers at the base of the door seal, the floor-level convective channel. Every electrical outlet in the room gets a foam outlet insulator. They cost less than $1 each at any hardware store and eliminate a convective loss point most people never consider. If the room has a window, interior window insulation film, the kind you shrink with a hairdryer, creates a dead air gap that dramatically reduces both conductive and convective loss through the glass. Then you layer your thermal mass. Sleeping on a cot or a mattress elevated off the floor eliminates conductive floor loss. A reflective emergency blanket hung on the wall opposite your sleeping position bounces your radiant heat back toward you instead of allowing it to be absorbed into the cold wall. Your sleeping bag goes over you. Additional blankets, coats, or any available insulating material goes around the bag on the sides and underneath. You are building a nested insulation system, addressing all 3 loss mechanisms simultaneously. And then, this is the step that makes the whole system work, and the step that feels almost too simple to be the answer. You use your own body heat as the primary thermal engine. A resting human body generates approximately 80 watts of heat continuously. A moderately active human body generates 300 to 500 watts. In a properly sealed, properly insulated small room, 1 or 2 people can maintain a survivable ambient temperature, above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. In outdoor conditions well below freezing, with no external heat source whatsoever. The physics supports this completely. The math has been run by thermal engineers, by emergency management researchers, by the authors of the survival protocols used by the Red Cross, and FEMA's community resilience documentation. In February 2021, Winter Storm Uri collapsed the Texas power grid. Over 4 million homes lost power for up to 6 days in temperatures that hit single digits in some regions. Conditions that Texas homes, built for heat management rather than cold retention, were architecturally unprepared for. Emergency room records from that week document hundreds of hypothermia cases, but buried in the community surveys conducted afterward by Texas A&M's Hazard Reduction and Recovery Center was a consistent finding among the households that reported maintaining survivable indoor temperatures. Without generators or secondary heat sources, they had, whether by instinct or prior knowledge, contracted their living space. They had gathered into one room. They had sealed it. They had used their bodies, their blankets, and their layering to hold the warmth they generated. They had done, without knowing the term for it, exactly what the Leningrad survivors did in 1941. And it worked for the same reason it always works, because the physics does not change. The gear industry will keep selling you sleeping bags and fire starters and emergency lanterns, and you should own those things. They are genuinely useful. But the catalog never includes a chapter on thermal zoning because you cannot buy thermal zoning. You can only learn it and practice it, and the industry that profits from your fear has no revenue model for that. Practice this before you need it. Identify your thermal zone room tonight. Walk its perimeter and find every gap, every outlet, every convective loss point. Get the outlet insulators. Get the door draft stoppers. Hang something heavy over the doorway and sit in the room for an hour with no heat running and measure what your own body does to the temperature. Do this once, just once, and you will understand, at a physical experience level, something that no amount of gear purchasing can teach you. Then share this with every prepper you know, not as a criticism of their preparation, as a completion of it. The survival community is full of serious, committed people who have invested real resources into being ready. They deserve the step that got left out of every product manual, every sponsored video, every affiliate-linked gear review that found it more profitable to sell them another item than to hand them the principle that makes all the other items work. Winter does not negotiate. The next grid failure will not wait for your research to catch up to your gear cache. The missing step has always been available. Now you have it.